Hi, welcome to this video podcast on paper 1 question 2, the language question for the fiction paper. This video is looking for any exam board, AQA, EDUQAS, OCR, Edexcel. The question we're looking at is, how does the writer use language here to describe the effects of the storm? So the how question, you will get one of these. If you're an EDUQAS, you might get 2 how questions, meaning these kind of questions here. So example of how questions could be: how does the writer make these lines tense or dramatic or surprising? How does the writer make the reader feel sympathy? How does the writer try to encourage your interest? Or how does this text try to persuade? Those are the kind of ones you're going to get. Okay, and like I said, the question we're looking at, and this is from the exam paper that I've put onto the video: how does the writer use language here to describe the effects of the storm? You could include the writer's choice of words and phrases, language features and techniques, sentence forms. So it does say could, but that means you should really, so you should use these. I tell my students that words and phrases, language features and techniques will be enough to get you a really high mark. If you're really confident on sentence form, by all means use it. However, I would say sentence forms is the one that if I was going to leave to the end, if I don't quite get to it, maybe I could leave out sentence forms. It's a bit more difficult to get a high mark. So here's the extract. So we're not going to read the extract for a minute. We're going to go back to it, but here's the exam question if you want to pause. Okay, and there it is again. Okay, so in the how question or the language question, you need to analyse the writer's use of language. However, students sometimes get a bit confused about what analyse means. So what does analyse mean? Well, it means to examine something carefully and in detail, then explain it and interpret it. So for example, you've got to comment on the effect of the word. So it's not enough just to say, use a quote and leave it at that. You've got to say why the writer, what effect it has on the audience. What does it make the reader feel? What does it make the reader think? So remember, we're looking at language here where a writer is deliberately, so on purpose, to use words to achieve a special effect on the reader. So the writer hasn't plucked these out of thin air. All the words and phrases and techniques the writers are using are for an effect. So if we look at the phrase, the boy snuck around the corner, the writer here could have said the boy walked around the corner, the boy looked around the corner, the boy sprinted around the corner. However, the writer has purposely used the word snuck, the verb snuck. So what does snuck mean? Well, snuck means that you're doing something quietly, doesn't it? So there's obviously a reason why the boy is sneaking somewhere. So is he a burglar? Is he trying to whisper in on a friend's secret? Okay, so all of these words are used for a reason. So a really simple analysis of this would be the use of the verb snuck, because remember it's a doing word. The use of the verb snuck suggests the boy is secretive and wants to hide what he's doing. Obviously we're going to do a much better, much more deep answer than that, but that's just a very simple way of looking at it. So the writer could have used the word walked, but snuck has been shown to a reason to suggest the character is secretive. So in this answer you need to use a range of quotes, so that means use lots of different quotes. If you're doing the AQA 8-mark question, you're looking for maybe 3 or 4 quotes. If you're doing EDUQAS and it's a 10-point answer, then probably you need 7 or 8. Okay, so what are we looking for in this question? So 10 things really, there's probably a few more. Adjectives, verbs, word choice, adverbs, deforest, exaggeration or hyperbole, how it starts and ends, punctuation, sensory language and figurative language. So if we spot any of these in the extract that have been used for a deliberate effect, we're going to comment on these and analyse these. So that's why it's really important that you know what all these terms are. So if at the moment you couldn't tell me straight away what an adverb is, or you couldn't tell me straight away what personification is, you need to revise these techniques before the exam. If you want to go on bpcenglish.wordpress.com, you will find this worksheet and that might help you for some of your revision. Okay, and you also need to say why the technique is effective. So you're not going to get marks for just going, that's alliteration. You're not going to get marks for just identifying these fancy techniques. Students get top marks by exploring just the word in depth. Don't fall into the trap of overcomplicating things. So basically, if you spot a technique has been used, you've got to say why it's been used and why it's effective. So keyword connotation. So connotations are the images or ideas associated with a word or phrase. So if you pick something up from the text, a word, you've got to explain why it's been used and what are the connotations. So if you want top marks, you've got to think beyond the obvious, so think beyond the obvious connotations. So how do we, so it's easy enough to say, isn't it, like we don't want to be obvious, but how do we be original and avoid vague comments? Well, one way of doing it is trying to work out this. What is the desired effect a writer is trying to achieve in the extract? So is the writer trying to bring across power? Is it trying to bring across danger? Is the writer trying to say a vibe of cruelty? Is the writer trying to be humorous? Or is the writer trying to give tension over? So what is the desired effect the writer is trying to achieve in this extract? In this extract about the weather, the actor is trying to get the idea of power across. So what you have to do then, in summary, is choose the desired effect, then look for the language the writer uses which achieves that effect. So in our case, we're going to look for language that tries to make the weather seem powerful. Zoom in on language. So we don't want a quote that is 2 sentences long. We want to zoom in or like really focus on a small quote, 1 word or 2 words. Okay, let's look at the extract again. What had awakened him was the noise from the storm. Wind lashing the trees, rain on the rooftop and thunder. He turned on the light with a sensation of being adrift in a boat and pushed closer to the bulk of the large dog sleeping beside him. He pictured the roaring Pacific Ocean a few blocks from his house, spilling in furious waves against the rocks. He lay listening to the storm and thinking about the black bird and about his mother, waiting for the pounding in his chest to die down. He was still tangled in the images of his bad dream. So what I want you to do then is look for the language that tried to make the weather seem powerful. So let's look for the 10 things. Let's look for figurative language. Let's look for hyperbole. Let's look for sentence structure. Let's look for adjectives, verbs, noun, adverbs that try to make the weather seem powerful. I'm not going to go into these too much detail because we're going to analyse these further one by one. But if we look at the top one, wind lashing the trees. So think to yourself, why is that verb being used? Then it said he pictured the roaring Pacific Ocean. Okay, again, think about why the verb roaring is being used. The writer could have just pictured the Pacific Ocean, but roaring's been there on purpose. And also spilling in waves, but the writer has chosen to use the adjective furious. So think to yourself, what are the connotations of these words? What is the connotation of lashing, roaring, furious? Okay, we could also have picked out a few other things. So apart from lashing, you could have said adrift, which makes the boy feel vulnerable because the weather is so harsh and vulnerable. We could say that spilling in furious waves. So we're going to talk about furious maybe in a bit, but spilling also suggests like a lack of control if you spill a drink or something. Personification, furious and angry, aggressive bully. Also the colon on the first line, what had awakened him from the noise of the storm. Well, we could say this has been used to create a dramatic pause, and then it's followed by a list of frightening weather conditions. So we've got the colon, then it's wind lashing, rain, thunder. Okay, so now we're going to analyse these 3 things that I've picked out, these words and phrases, and explain their effect. So connotations, we said earlier, is the images or ideas associated with a word or phrase. So wild is not a word used in the extract, but if we just use wild, put that in the middle of our mind map. What connotations, what ideas or images or ideas come from the word wild? Well, it makes me think wildlife, as in wildlife, out in the wild. Energetic, mad, untamed, angry, out of control. So the ones that are bigger, I think, are better things we can talk about. But all of these here, we've got 6 words here, 6 images, 6 ideas just from the word wild. So this is what you've got to do when you find a word in your extract and explore it and analyse it. Why has that word been used? So the one we're going to look at first is the wind lashing the trees. Okay, so the writer could have put lots of different verbs. Yeah, he or she could have put the wind hit the trees, the wind slapped the trees, the wind tapped the trees, the wind touched the trees, the wind crashed into. So think to yourself, why is lash been used? What does that suggest? What connotations do we get from lashing? Okay, so what does lashing actually mean? So it's basically to strike or beat with a whip almost, or to beat violently or sharply against. So for example, the rain lashed the trees. All of these things are strikes or are aggressive actions, a lot to do with violence and punishment. So if we put lash in the middle now, what ideas or images do we get with the word lash? Well, I get unpredictable, I get violent, I get power, I get pain. So if you think about someone being lashed, someone being punished, Yeah, you lash of a whip. Violence, pain and power are probably the three things that come to your mind. So what kind of verb is lashed? Well, it's a violent verb. It's a powerful verb. It's an unpredictable verb. It's a painful verb. So all of these words that we just looked at, these are the kind of verb that lashed is. So powerful, painful, violent, unpredictable. The other quote I want to look at is the roaring Pacific Ocean. So again, what does roaring mean? The writer could have just put the Pacific Ocean, but he's decided to put the roaring Pacific Ocean. Okay, so roaring means making or causing a roar, like an animal. Okay, so that's what we think, really, isn't it? Like a lion, like a wild animal making a growl. So what kind of adjective is it? Well, it's almost like we think of animals, don't we? Like the king of the jungle. It's not just one animal. The lion is the king, the top one in the jungle. It's also appeals to our sensory language, isn't it? Like that we hear. So sensory, it's very loud. It's power, isn't it? The lion is the most powerful animal. And again, getting that violence motif again, violent, roar. So what do lions do? They're known for violence, aren't they? They're known for being powerful. So again, roaring, what kind of verb is it? Animals, loud, powerful, violent. So the three things we've probably talked about, we've highlighted in the paper. Straight away, we can almost put it into a sentence, can't we? So lashing, this suggests it's whipping them, the storm is whipping them. Furious implies the ocean is angry and aggressive and it crashes against the rocks. And roaring is almost like a deafening noise to suggest it's attacking the land, the storm is attacking the land like a wild animal. So how can we structure our answer? Okay, there's our extract again. How does the writer use language to describe the effects of the storm? So the first thing we're always going to use the sentence starter the writer uses. Number two, we're going to use an adjective and a technique. So for example, first of all, we're going to spot the technique. So is it a noun? Is it a simile? Is it a verb? So the first one we're looking at is lashing. So that's a verb. So also, what kind of verb is it? So we've talked about this. So we've said it's powerful, but I'm going to go for violent. So violent is my adjective and my technique is verb. So I'm going to say the writer uses the violent verb. Number three, to show. So what does it show? So in this case, we're talking about the effects of the storm. So I've put the writer uses the violent verb to describe the power of the storm. Number four, I need my quote. Again, we're zooming in on one or two words. We're saying a lot about a little. So my quote is just lashing. So the writer uses the violent verb to describe the power of the storm with lashing. Okay. Now, the part I'm going to get my marks for, the connotation of the chosen word. So what is the connotation of the word lashing? Well, lashing has connotations of a whip, suggesting the storm is cruel and vicious and the trees are helpless. So what I'm saying is the writer has used the word lashing to suggest that the land is almost being punished by the storm. Okay. And what effect does this have on the reader? Well, as readers, we feel that this storm is destructive. It is overwhelming, attacking everything in its path, including the trees. So you could also add there, you feel like the storm is punishing, because we talked about that before. The storm is trying to cause pain to the land. And there it is, all in one PE. So the writer uses the violent verb lashing to describe the power of the storm. Lashing has connotations of a whip, suggesting the storm is cruel and vicious and that the trees are helpless. As readers, we feel that this storm is destructive, as it is overwhelming, attacking everything in its path, including the trees. So there it is, all in one bit. So point, technique, show, quote, connotations, affecting the reader. So it's only one little sentence from this sheet. However, we add it all together, it looks like a pretty impressive and deep paragraph where you've analysed and said the effect on the reader. It's exactly what we want. If you want to get this sheet to help you structure for this question, it is on bpcenglish.wordpress.com. It's up there as a word page, and all you need to do is download it. Now we're going to look at some banned explanations. So what I mean by that is when we're doing the point, evidence, explain, these are the things that you should never put in your exam. So you've done a point and quote, and then you're saying why you picked your quote. We don't want anything like, it makes the reader want to read on, it puts an image in the reader's mind, it makes it interesting for the reader. So none of those answers will get you a mark. I put brackets where it puts an image in the reader's mind of what? If you went on to explain an image in the reader's mind of punishment or something like that, then that will get you a mark. But something vague like puts an image in the reader's mind or gives attention to it or makes the reader want to move on, these aren't going to get you good grades. Okay, these statements are all vague and could be used about any text. Okay, when we're doing the answers for your paragraphs, for your answer to this question, write your answer in chronological order. So track the text down from top to bottom, just because it makes it simpler for you to write and also simpler for the examiner that if you're making your comments from top to bottom. Okay, so the other one that we looked at, roaring. Okay, roaring. The writer uses the animalistic adjective roaring to describe the ferocious noise of the ocean. Roaring has connotations of a lion seeking its prey in the jungle, suggesting the storm has transformed the ocean into a powerful and aggressive beast. As readers, we feel the storm is immensely powerful and it has changed the ocean, normally associated with peace and tranquility, into a violent being which should be feared and sheltered from. So we've got my point, we've got the technique, the adjective, we've got the quote, roaring. We've said what it's to describe, the ocean. Then we've given connotations of the word roaring, so why it's been used, and then we've given the audience reaction that we feel because of this the storm is immensely powerful. Okay, so let's look at another 8 out of 8 answer, or 10 out of 10 answer if you do an EDUCAS. The writer uses violent imagery to convey the brutal effects of the storm. The wind is lashing the trees, a verb implying that it's so forceful it is ruthlessly thrashing them, as if nature is inflicting a cruel punishment on the landscape. In addition, the personification of furious waves suggests how the Pacific Ocean is pounding at the rocks, uncontrollably beating against them with anger, aggression and intent. The writer also uses sound imagery to add to the impact of the visual description of the ocean roaring by using an adjective to suggest the thunderous noise of the storm, which sounds like a wild animal full of rage. So this is 8 out of 8. This is just a student one I picked up, okay? So, but basically it's the same as ours. It might sound a little bit posher in certain bit, but basically we're talking about lashing, we're talking about furious waves, we're talking about roaring and why those words have been chosen. Okay, here's another one which did well. So again, you'll notice that the 8 out of the ones that are 100% marks, they tend to pick up on the same points. So it's really important that you pick which ones you're going to talk about in the exam. So again, lashing is used. If you want to pause the video and read it all of it yourself, but basically the same point. So lashing the trees, which is talking about forcefulness. Personification of furious suggests the ocean is angry, and we've even got roaring at the end, which is an adjective to describe a wild animal. So they're basically the same point. So these 8 out of 8 marks or 10 out of 10 marks, they're using the same point. So if you want to read through the different paragraphs, feel free to pause. Okay, this is another student example. This student would have probably got sort of 4 out of 8. So if you read it through, there's certain things that are wrong. So for example, the writer is talking about adjectives, however he uses verbs. So pounding, lashing, these are verbs. The person has described them as adjectives, so they would get marked down for this. So it's really important that you know the techniques. Okay, another one. On the other side, the words noise and lashing describe the storm being dangerous, possibly unexpected. Altogether, the writers use adjectives like these. So again, lashing is a verb. So again, the person hasn't quite got the hang of it. However, it's not a bad point because they say it creates tension for the reader, meaning the reader is more likely to read on. It's pretty vague. It's probably going to get 4 out of 8. It's not going to hurt the top marks. So, summary then. Focus on what happens and how the language is used to support this. Focus on what the writer is doing. Use phrases like the writer uses. You must use correct subject terminology. We just saw people who didn't use it and they would get marked down for that. Big thing. Explain the effect on the reader and try and use as many examples and quotes as possible. Again, use bpcenglish.wordpress.com. If you're not sure how to structure it, use the structure sheet we've given you there.